I'm the Director of Branding and Product Development at Vuber Vaporizers. I'm also a contributing writer for the Northwest Leaf, Ladybud Magazine, and Culture Magazine, which all focus on medical cannabis. I am also the Executive Director at Allele Seeds Research, which consults for medical and recreational cannabis production, processing, and distribution in Washington State. In case you're wondering, I don't sleep very much, so I do get a lot of work done. As far as Vuber Vaporizers go, this is a product and a company that a group, 7 other people and myself have started January 2014. We are now in 65 different dispensaries in the state of Washington. We've grown into Montana, Northern Oregon, and now we're working on Florida once you guys get up online. This is what we've all been talking about as an ancillary business, and it is crushing. Okay, sales are off the chain. We had a biggest problem. We were almost not able to make it here with the product. So for the gold members, you have in your pack, you'll be receiving at the end of the pack here, you'll have to go see Noelle. She'll check your name off the list, and you'll be receiving a free Vuber vaporizer, which you guys can use. There's information in here. You can access our salesman. There's actually an extra cartridge in each one, so you can use one cartridge. You can fill it with e-cig juice. You can use anything you want to try cutting at your own home with any of the concentrates that you might have. And you can try and get it in there yourself. We don't really recommend that. It's a very scientific method if you don't know the stability of your concentrate. So I would start off with maybe e-cigarette juice that has 0 nicotine to try to learn the flavors and the processes of how it works. YouTube is a phenomenal source for how these things work, and we also have videos coming up on our website soon, vuber.net. That will show you what's going on. But every gold member, I believe it is, right, Tom? Every gold member will be receiving a free Vuber vaporizer, and that's really cool. So you guys can thank Tom for that. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about myself as far as where I came from and how I got to where I am now in the medical cannabis community. I was born on May 29th, 1981, with a severe case of jaundice, which over time has led me to be diagnosed with colitis and a liver disorder called constitutional hepatic dysfunction. Unfortunately, CHD and colitis are not final diagnoses. Basically, what this means is that the medical community has 0 idea of what is going on inside of me. These diseases cause intestinal spasms, extreme nausea, wasting syndrome, depression, and severe anxiety about eating food, all of which I've had to deal with my entire life. So if you can try to imagine taking a bite of food, but knowing that every time you eat, you're going to want to throw up, or you're going to be in so much pain that the only thing you can do is lay on the ground, cry, and scream. It's not very pleasant watching a grown man rolling around on the ground, holding his stomach, crying and screaming like a child. But unfortunately, there is little to nothing the medical community has been able to do for me. After trying a regimen of different medications from antibiotics to phenobarbital that didn't work, I decided the only way to stop the pain and suffering was to kill myself. You don't often hear about children trying to commit suicide, but at the age of 12, I'd already dealt with enough suffering and pain that I didn't even want to wake up and play with my dog or any of my friends. Lucky for me, the entire bottle of aspirin I ate didn't sit very well with my stomach issues. Life was not very easy, and it surely was not fun for me as a teenager. The third weekend in June of 1994, I was playing roller hockey with my mates, and one of them had purchased a bag of what looked like a ground-up cannabis leaves. So at the age of 13, I tried cannabis socially for the first time. Within minutes, the pain I had endured my entire life had been greatly reduced. I didn't feel as if there was something trying to eat its way outside of my body. I felt alive. I felt as close to what I thought most people feel like on a day-to-day basis. I felt like a child should feel, happy. From that day on, I began to research cannabis, going to all the libraries in the area, trying to find books about this wonderful plant. I scoured the internet and what was available at AOL.com, as that was my portal at that time to this newfound medicine. The internet had literally saved my life. So I planted my first crop of seeds at 13 years of age that year and then began to grow some of the worst cannabis you have ever seen in your life. But my failures only pushed me harder to learn more, and I began to actually see an improvement in my crop harvest within a few months. So by the end of the year, I actually had some sort of product that I could show my friends and be like, hey, I know a guy. I graduated high school in 1999 and was excited to see that California, Washington, and Oregon had started medical marijuana programs to help protect patients and their safe access to their medicine. I spent a few years traveling around the United States learning about different environmental conditions and how cannabis reacted to them. I spent time in Hawaii, Michigan, Florida, and New York acquiring genetics and learning more about myself and my disorder and this wonderful plant called cannabis. In 2006, my father was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which then became mantle cell lymphoma in 2007. After caretaking for him for about 2 years, my father advised me to go and finish my education. So I left him in the care of his wonderful partner, and since then, he's been able to make a full recovery, living a very active life for a man who died twice during chemotherapy. So in 2008, I moved across the country to Pullman, Washington, and began taking classes at Washington State University. While studying organic agriculture and philosophy of law, I worked as a lab technician assistant in the molecular plant science department. This means that while I studied organic agriculture, I was also working with genetically modified organisms. What a weirdo. But studying both sides of this spectrum has allowed me a greater understanding of both the plant and political sciences behind it. In 2009, I started a Washington State licensed medical cannabis collective, which provided medical cannabis to less than 20 authorized Washington State patients. At that time, I also started the WSU chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. This point, I realized that if I wanted to protect my right to access my medicine, I had to show people that it was truly a medicine. And so I elevated my activism and became more open about my cannabis use and my disease. This had provided me with opportunities to meet people and also drew quite a lot of attention to myself and to my business. After operating a successful medical cannabis business for 2 years, providing patients with the best medication at the lowest donation rates, I met my biggest challenge, the Quad City Drug Task Force. In 2011, I was arrested for intent to distribute cannabis. I was arrested for intent to distribute cannabis after denying an undercover narcotics agent access to medical marijuana because he did not have the proper authorization. Let me reiterate that one more time. I was arrested for intent to distribute cannabis after denying a police officer authorization to my medical cannabis because he did not have proper authorization. After I was arrested, the police obtained a search warrant for my residence and seized my growing equipment, my supplies. They froze my company's bank account, which was empty at the time, and they also seized a whopping $200 in cash. My intention as a medical cannabis provider was never to become rich. It was to provide patients with the best medicine at the lowest cost possible while still being able to cover my costs, provide medicine to myself, breed new strains, and advance medical cannabis research. I was offered a deal by the assistant district prosecutor of Whitman County to reduce the 5 felonies I was facing to 2 felonies and a year in prison. I refused any deal as I felt that I was not a criminal and that I was properly following Washington State medical cannabis laws. Unfortunately, the laws in Washington State were written in a manner that didn't actually legalize medical cannabis back in 1988, but what it did was it provided patients who had doctor's authorizations with what's called an affirmative defense. This means after you've been arrested for possession or production of illegal cannabis, you can provide your medical paperwork to the jury, and they can decide if you were abusing your right or you were within the framework of the law. So I went to trial and represented myself because my public defender refused to take the case to trial and said I should take the deal. I highly suggest you never do that. One benefit to representing yourself in court is you are not legally bound to the rules and ethics lawyers are. This allowed me to convince the judge to be the first person in the United States to legally be allowed to consume cannabis in a courtroom during a trial. So, as I turned to the jury and consumed an entire month's worth of liquid cannabis known as tincture, I then proceeded to take to the trial where I was able to get the police to admit to an entrapment. In my case, the judge blocked the jury from allowing me to present the affirmative defense, and so I was tried and convicted as a drug dealer. Because I was not allowed to mention the term medical cannabis during the trial, or I would have been held in contempt and placed in jail, and since I was representing myself, I would have automatically lost the trial. So, let's see, sorry, I lost my little space here. But so I was facing 8 years in prison with a mandatory minimum of 5 years for a nonviolent victimless crime. I spent 52 days in jail, and sadly, they didn't heed the warnings from myself or my doctors. I ended up vomiting up all the food they fed me, having intense spasms and nausea almost every day, all day long. I spent time with 6 different cellmates, ranging from meth possession charges to attempted murderers. Yes, one of my roommates was an attempted murderer. He attempted to shoot his wife in the face with a gun. We shared a cell. I did not sleep very well. The guards thought I was lying about my disorder so I could just go out and smoke pot whenever I felt like it. So they stuck me in solitary confinement for 2 weeks and videotaped every minute of my life, trying to prove that I was faking it. I ended up losing over 30 pounds in the time I was in jail, and for somebody who's 5'10" and 150 pounds going into jail, that didn't work out so well for me. So I was released on the fact that it was too expensive for the jail to provide health care and that I could possibly die without access to my medicine, which they had no intention of allowing me to access while in jail. While in jail, my mother had been able to acquire a lawyer for myself and initiate the appeals process. This lawyer's name is Douglas Hyatt. Douglas Hyatt is probably the top cannabis lawyer in the country for criminal defense. Guaranteed. That's why I'm standing here in front of you right now. I'm technically incarcerated. Douglas ran the show in the courtroom. He directed the judge to release me with full medical rights to grow, process, possess, and distribute medical cannabis, not only for myself, but for other patients also. 3 years later, I'm still dealing with the appeals process hearing, and I can still face another 80 days in jail if I lose. And we have legalized cannabis in Washington state. So, if I win, what happens? I get my life back, right? Sort of. I do not get anything they seized from me because of the Washington State drug felony, they are drug felony possession charges. You basically lose all your rights to your stuff, and you don't get it back. It's not good. So, after getting out of jail, I decided to leave Eastern Washington since my financial aid was revoked due to the fact that I was now a convicted drug felon. I had trouble finding housing, trouble finding a job, and was living out of the back of my car until I was able to find a job at a local medical cannabis dispensary called Green Ambrosia. After joining Green Ambrosia, I was able to get back on my feet and start working and getting my life back together again. Working as much as I could to save up money, I decided to step up my activism and begin writing articles and submitting them to local medical marijuana magazines. I was picked up by the Northwest Leaf, and I've been writing for them for over a year now. Ladybud Magazine and I have just started working. They're out of Denver. That's Diane Fornbacher from Normal. She is doing wonders with Ladybud Magazine. I highly suggest you check out their website. They have articles that cover everything, not just medical marijuana, but everything. So even though the state of Washington had taken everything away from me, I refused to let them take my mind away from me. So now that Washington has voted to legalize recreational cannabis and Colorado is already riding the money train, what are we looking at for the future of medical cannabis across America? Well, one of the best things that we can look at is standardizations. Not only in the products that we are being produced and sold at retail storefronts and medical access points, but also the professionalism within the industry. Cannabis growers and hash processors have been hiding underground since the beginning of the war on drugs. But now we are seeing a whole new realm of opening up for people like myself and all of you. We are now able to step into cannabis careers and not worry about local police coming to arrest us anymore. Or we're not worried about losing everything we have in a house fire because you can't have a certified electrician come wire up your basement home grow because it's illegal. What does a regulated cannabis industry look like? Well, it looks like every other commerce industry. It looks like the wine industry. It looks like the beer industry. When we regulate cannabis, instead of criminalizing it, we allow folks who are working in the industry to have access to benefits like 401k plans, healthcare, retirement plans, paid vacations. Tell a grower who's staying indoors for 4 cycles a year and knows nobody, he's hermiting himself, that he can have a paid vacation, he's gonna wanna sign up real fast. So, when we regulate cannabis instead of criminalizing it, we get all these benefits. With a regulated market, we will see a reduction in crime associated to gangs who distribute cannabis, a reduction in the amount of money being spent in law enforcement on drug trafficking and production, and also an increase in the safety of our communities because of regulated points of access instead of some guy waiting to meet you in a Walmart parking lot. Washington State almost lost our medical cannabis laws this last legislative session, which is weird since we quote-unquote have legalized cannabis in Washington State. I want to talk to you a little bit about how cannabis is not legalized in Washington State. Washington State, there was a group of people called I-502, Initiative 502, that initially wrote their initiative similar to what happened in Florida here, is what happened here. When they wrote it, they never expected it to pass, so it wasn't written very well. That's a huge problem. Now we're dealing with all these things, the legislators trying to fix all these problems that were written into this poor legislation, like never removing cannabis from Schedule I. Instead, they wrote into the law that they wrote a new law that says it's not a violation of the old law if you're an adult 21 and up, you're possessing less than 28 grams of dried flower, less than 7 grams of concentrate, less than 72 ounces of infused products, which means if you go over any of those amounts, you are now a felon. It is not legal to possess 29 grams of marijuana as an adult in Washington State. If you are under the age of 18, it is illegal to possess cannabis at all. You are now considered a misdemeanor. You've been charged with a crime. But isn't cannabis legal? We don't have home grows in Washington. It is illegal to grow cannabis recreationally at your home. Denver has 6 plants. You can grow 6 plants at your home. Do whatever you want with them. You can home brew your own alcohol in Washington, but you cannot grow your own plants. You have to have a permit from the state to do that. So, what is the most important thing that we as cannabis entrepreneurs can do to help promote the message that cannabis is medicine? Talk. Open your mouths. Speak to your friends. Contact your legislators. Your lawyer friends over here were speaking about it earlier. The most important thing you can do is contact your legislators. I can probably guarantee you that most of you in this room do not know who your legislators are. You probably don't know who your senator is, and you don't know who your representative is. That's a problem, especially if you're a business owner. You need to be in contact with these people. You have to be making positive relationships with them. I am covered in tattoos. My hair used to be down to here in the 90s. I cannot walk into a Senate House. I cannot walk into into any other place in government and be respected. You have to act like they do. You have to laugh like they do. You have to shake their hands like they do. They will not even give you the time of day. This sucks. It sucks. But guess what? If we want to make progress, we all have to change a little bit. So this is the one, if you can take anything away from me, the most important thing you can do is be polite. Be polite, and be polite to your legislators. Even if they're like, you're a jerk. You don't know anything about what you're talking about. Marijuana kills people. You say, that is a great opinion to have, you know, and that is your own personal opinion, but today I'd like to educate you with some science on the background of what is actually happening in laboratories across the United States. Approach it like it is something that is a ticking time bomb about to explode, and you need to be very cautious. Polite, intelligent, and articulate are the most important things to remember when you're talking to your legislators. We live in America. It's democracy. Engage in it. You have to. Otherwise, you will lose everything you have. If you want to start a business, that's awesome. But don't think for 1 second that everything can be taken away from you and you won't be sitting behind bars. Because if you think that you won't get arrested in this business, you're a fool. It's federally illegal. At any time of the day, the federal government can come in here and take everything out of you. Take everything. They can take your kids away from you, they can take your house from you, and there is nothing you can do about it. Nothing. So, what do we have to do? We have to get people like us into government. We have to get people like us at the top part of these businesses. What has gotten us here today? Grassroots campaigns, grassroots organizations like the Florida Cannabis Coalition. But what is the Florida Cannabis Coalition doing that other places aren't doing? They're bringing business ethics, professionalism, and all the other things that make business happen on a day-to-day operation. That's what they're bringing here. And that's what we need. We need to move forward as a whole group with a whole agenda in one direction. because when the group starts fizzling out and people start going, no, we can't have this, or I refuse to be on a registry, we need to sit down and figure out where the end goal is. And the end goal is always medical cannabis saves lives, and we need to get proper access to that. Proper access goes both ways for the patient, and it also goes for the distributor and the retailer. You as a retailer, if you're interested in opening a retail business, you have to be 100% compliant, 110% compliant. You'll lose everything, everything. You'll be living in the back of a car under a bridge. I was living in the back of a car because I had no ability to get an apartment. I have to co-sign everything or pay thousands of dollars of hard cash. I'm not allowed to leave the country. I wasn't even allowed to leave the state of Washington when I was convicted originally. So I have no gun rights. I can't not vote. I never was able to vote for I-502. I couldn't vote yes or no. I couldn't do anything because my rights were taken away from me. It's so important to exercise your right. I cannot express how important it is to exercise your rights, because when they're gone, the only thing you can do is go to your legislator and talk to them. You cannot vote anything in any other way. You cannot influence anybody but by speaking to your legislator. So, when we look back through history, what is the biggest failure in American history? The one concept that has been so detrimental to our society is prohibition. This isn't anything new. We've already seen this happen. Prohibition is so detrimental, it's the only constitutional amendment to ever be repealed. That means Congress got together, decided what they'd done before was a bad idea, fixed it, got the president to sign off on it, and then you got 2/3 of the entire states to come back and ratify that amendment. We can barely even get Congress to agree on lunch today, let alone passing any sort of bill or anything like that. But what we can do is show them what they've done in the past and how important it is to lift the prohibition of cannabis on a federal level. Remember, your state legislators and your state senators don't just work here in Florida. They work in DC. They're doing things on a federal level. Each one of those people has a program that they're in charge of or that they run. Someone might be in charge of Energy Commission. Somebody else might be in charge of Agriculture Commission. If your senator is the head of the Agricultural Commission, or in Florida, or whoever the commission is, speak to them and speak to them what they know. Find out, do a little background research on your representatives and say, hey, I see that you're really big into civil rights. You should really look into the disparity between black people and white people getting arrested, because white people use drugs at a higher rate than black people do, except for black people are going to jail far more than white people are. And if you have a black representative or a Hispanic representative, you're going to be able to connect with them on a level that they understand, because you have to be able to connect. And you have to be able to go in the background of each and one of these people. Each one of them came from somewhere. They know something as a specialty in their market. Connect with that. So when we look back at Prohibition, we see that alcohol was extreme failure. This is the best example to lift what we're doing here today. Just go and explain. We have gangs running these grow houses. We have gangs distributing this in the streets. We had gangs like Al Capone doing this in the 1920s with alcohol. It's a mirror. It's an exact mirror. So educate yourself on the history of America and see where we're going through. There are lots of things going on. There are many states that passed medical marijuana legislation in the 1970s and in the early 80s. There are four federal patients who receive marijuana from federal agencies. Irv Rosenfeld lives here in Florida, and he gets a tin of marijuana every month from the federal government. So the federal government also has patents. If you want to look up patents, they have a patent on the antioxidant neuroprotective properties of cannabinoids. So for patients who have ALS or MS, you are able to now stop that degenerative process and slow it and reverse it and actually get better. What we've seen is patients with ALS and patients with MS have severe spasticity, and sometimes they also have extreme saliva production. I lived with a gentleman who had ALS, and he poured saliva out of his mouth to the point where he had to keep a rag in there to keep it from just getting all over the place. So what we did was we went on the internet and we looked at two websites. One was called weedmaps.com and the other one's called leafly.com. These two websites are dispensary locators or treatment center locators for Colorado and all the other states that have medical cannabis and recreational cannabis. What they do is they display different strains, reviews of those strains, and where you can locate them and at the cost at what you can get them. So we flicked through and we said, all right, what are we looking for to help cure his overproductive salivary gland? Cottonmouth. What's the one negative effect that most people get when they smoke cannabis? Cottonmouth. So we flicked to the negative section of the negative reviews, and we looked for the worst plant, we looked for the one plant that gave you the worst cottonmouth. And for him, the negative effects were benefits. So as the science produces information and we move forward in a legitimate fashion, we're going to see so much more information, so much more access to money, and so much more just wonderful progress in this industry because we have things like standardizations in business. Big business is doing something that like grassroots just couldn't do. They're getting the standardizations, the business ethics out there so that people can do all the stuff that we want to do and not be like, yeah, I'm a pizza guy, but I drive a Jaguar. You know, what's going on? Why do I have to lie about what I want to do as a career or for the rest of my life? I love what I do. I grow medical cannabis. What? I love it. I love what I do. And you should be able to love what you do too, but we have to be safe, right? So we have to be intelligent, articulate, and we have to be able to contact and connect with our representatives. It doesn't get any more legit than that. Like, that's the bottom line. And we can all do it. Because if you go as a group, you bring a couple people, you know, keep yourself well dressed. You want to be respected. Yeah, it's great to wear, you know, cut off jeans, but when you go to court, they're not going to let you in with baby fat on your butt. You're right, and your local representative doesn't want to see that either. They want to see the people who are making money in their community, giving back to their community. How are you helping your community with your cannabis production? Okay, you know, educate them. They're ignorant. Your legislator is ignorant. They know nothing about this. Maybe a couple of them do, maybe. And they're the ones that you don't have to educate, right? But what's the most important thing? You have to know about something to care about it. They don't care because they don't know. They don't. They know nothing. So a lot of us are specialists in our area. Some people may be specialists with credit card processing. Some people may be specialists with plastics productions. That doesn't mean you can't go to your local representative and not talk about how you benefit the community. Do you pay B&O taxes? Do you do all the other things that businesses do to operate and do all that stuff? Well, let your representative know that, because that then will put a whole different spin. I've been able, actually, in the last legislative session where we almost lost medical cannabis, I was receiving phone calls from my state rep where I was literally in a business meeting and I go, Representative Santos, excuse me. Yes, Representative Santos, it's a pleasure to hear from you. You would like to hear my input on SB 5083? Okay, this is what I think about point. You know, bring your points in there. Write them out on a piece of paper so that when you see a representative in the House or wherever you are in your congressional matter, just show the piece of paper. These are the points that I'm looking at. These are the most important things that you really should focus on. Be this very quick and very intelligent with your answers, because I cannot stress that enough. How am I doing on time?
To wrap it up right now.
Cool.
But,
So
you know,
anybody have any questions? You want to get the mic? And sorry if I went off on any rabbit holes, by the way, because sometimes that happens.
Now, I got my Washington medical license as well, and I was just reading last month or the month before that they actually repealed how many plants you could have. They knocked it down from, I think, 12 to 3 or 6.
They were looking at doing that. Luckily enough, myself and a group of about 50 other patients were at the legislature for about 3 weeks straight lobbying against that. And Washington State has the most lenient medical marijuana laws or medical cannabis laws in the country. And so an individual patient can grow up to 15 plants in any stage. and what's known as a collective garden, so 2 or more people can grow up to 45 plants. And those numbers are kind of like wishy-washy because in the law it says if you need to have more plants, you can just go to court when you get arrested and tell the judge, I need 100 plants because I need concentrates because smoking 500 joints a day doesn't work for me. So there are, I have friends with 200 light grows. We're talking thousands of dollars a week, $50,000 a week harvests. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is serious business, serious business. And these guys are all paying taxes. They pay their business taxes, they pay their sales taxes, and they haven't gone to jail because they do so. When I had my dispensary, we shut the dispensary down because we were 2 feet short of the 1,000 mark line. If you went as the crow flies, it was 998 feet. If you walked around, it was 1,012 feet. So we shut our doors because we didn't want to go to federal prison. We made that choice. We had to tell a lot of patients that they couldn't access their cannabis from us anymore. And that hurt a lot of people. Because I personally did deliveries to patients who were bedridden, and they got their medicine from me, and they are not accessing their medicine from me anymore. They have to go somewhere else, build a relationship with another place. Our dispensary had a program set up for those who were indigent or had low income. If you had low income and you could bring your Social Security information in, we could verify all that good information. We'd set you up on a program where we'd get you everything at cost, or we had growers who actually donated free medicine because they have so much medicine. The market's so flooded in Washington State, we're paying $8 a gram. 8.
We got 2 more questions, and then one right back here.
Hi, I just had a quick question about activism. I'm with United for Care.
Yep.
So when you're contacting your legislators, and you touched on it a little bit, be very brief but intelligent. Like, what would you say would be an effective, string of arguments that you can use on them?
Really comes down to what kind of topic you're looking at. So with legislation, and we all know that the legislation is really difficult to read. So if you have any lawyer friends or somebody who's in law school or has an up on it, I mean, you can spend hours just reading the same sentence over going, who wrote this? This doesn't make sense. I can't even pronounce half these words. Honestly, you pick and choose your topics. If you're interested in the ancillary market and you want to go out there and say, I don't want any reduction on hydroponic supply stores or something like that, go in there and do that. If you're a certain patient and you need certain access, like, for instance, if you're bedridden, you say, hey, it's great that you all have these treatment centers open, but I have to have home delivery. And if Florida says home delivery is illegal, well, you need to find patients who are heavily bedridden and make appointments with your legislator and say, hey, it's really important that this constituent, I'm a constituent of yours, I'm a business owner in your district. And remember, you can own a business in another district and you can live in a separate district, and you are a constituent of both. So you can actually touch more representatives with your message because you are all over in different counties. Does that answer your question? It's hard to say. Be polite. Try to do as much research as you can on the individual topic you're talking to, and be very to the point, because legislators, you can pull them off the floor. So if they're in session, you can say, hey, my legislator is Representative Santos. I'm going to write a note, pull her off the floor. She'll come off the floor and she'll say, hey, it's a pleasure to meet you. What would you like to talk about today? You say, hi, my name is Tyler J. Marquardt. I'm a director of branding and production at Vuber Vaporizers, and I'd just like to talk to you about medical cannabis for a couple minutes. These are the couple of points I'd like to go over. It's really important that you hit this, this, and this. I don't think this would be really good in the legislation because of X, Y, Z reasons. Just basically give them the scientific method. Just be truthful. Don't try to lie to them. When you want to create a very, very good relationship so that they're contacting you as a professional and a specialist in your area about that part of the legislation. Because most of these representatives and senators are business people in their own right, or they have a background in political science or something. They don't have a background in plant science or anything like that. So if you're a specialist in something, that's something really to drill in.